Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for joining us for what I think is the final forum for Eugene Mayor. I'm Linda Lynch. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. Obviously, I'm not going to do this work tonight, or else I'd have gotten myself a chair. The Lane County League attempts to offer the community opportunities to inform themselves about candidates and their platforms and their ideas for leading the city or the county or the state into the future. And our sponsors tonight, besides the League, are the United League of Latin American Citizens, LULAC, NAACP of Lane County, AARP Oregon, and the Eugene City Club. Tonight's forum will be taped and will be available on the League of Women Voters of Lane County website, LWVLC.org. And I hope you'll join us. We have one more forum scheduled. This is like the 9th in a long series. But next week we'll be at the Wildish Theater in Springfield for the Secretary of State candidates, both parties, at the Wildish Community Theater on Tuesday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. Thomas Jefferson famously said, "Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government." So in that manner, the League of Women Voters is your sponsor and is a nonpartisan political organization. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and we attempt to influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Having said that, I'm going to introduce Doug Barber, who's our moderator tonight. So please silence your cell phones. And if you have trouble hearing, just wave your hand. People will notice, and we'll get the microphones adjusted. Doug has his own firm, Lobby Oregon, and he lobbies at the Oregon legislature for a variety of clients. He might be known to some people formerly as a reporter at KEZI or a member of the Ullum Group. Doug is active with he's on the board of the Eugene Public Library Foundation, and is a leader in the Imagination Library effort. It says here he's been on the board of the Oregon Center for Applied Science for 10 years. So thank you. Welcome, Doug Barber.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Welcome. To all of you who have come here tonight to participate in the election process by hearing from the candidates for Eugene Mayor. Let's start by introducing the candidates. In alphabetical order, Bob Cassidy, a retired credit union manager and former eWeb commissioner. Mike Clark, a management consultant and city councilor from North Eugene. Scott Landfield, an owner of Tsunami Books. Stefan Streck, a student and food service worker at the University of Oregon, and Lucy Vinnis, former development director at Shelter Care. Please join me in welcoming the candidates. Here is the format for this evening's forum. We will begin with opening statements of up to 1.5 minutes for each candidate. Then we will have a series of questions submitted by the sponsors of this debate. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond to each of those questions. The second portion of the forum will consist of questions from the audience, which will be vetted by the League of Women Voters for clarity and to reduce repetition. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond to an audience question. So we strongly encourage you to begin jotting down your questions now. There are 3x5 cards available on your seat or around the room. Please write your question on the card and hold it in the air or pass it to the aisle where a volunteer can collect it. Volunteers will pick up the questions throughout the forum. If you need a card, please raise your hand and a volunteer will provide you with one. We will try to ask as many audience questions as time allows. We will close the forum by giving each of the candidates up to 1.5 minutes for closing statements. Please hold your applause so we may address as many questions as possible. The order for speaking was chosen by a draw of cards. Lucy Vinnis will begin with her opening statement. Lucy?
Thank you. Am I right on this?
You
Can you
just
hear
have
me?
to be close to the microphone so that it
All
picks
right.
up.
Thank you so much. My story begins, I came to Eugene in 1991. I arrived behind the wheel of a 27-foot RV. My husband and I had sold a home in the Washington, D.C. area, packed up our 2-year-old son, and took to the roads for a year, looking for the perfect place to live. And we chose Eugene. We chose Eugene for 3 reasons. We were starting a family, and we thought this would be a great place to raise our children. I have a background in agriculture and land use, and I was committed to living in a community that lived well within its landscape, and Eugene has a long and good history of that. And when we arrived, we felt confident that we would be able to find rewarding employment and engaging opportunities to be involved in the community. In my 25 years here, I have been devoted to community issues, working on behalf of school funding, on behalf of opportunities for young people to learn outside of the classroom, on agriculture, natural resources, and sustainability issues, and most recently on poverty and homelessness issues through shelter care. My background in nonprofits is excellent experience for the role of mayor. The mayor's key job is to bring people together to understand and move forward on critical issues. That's the work I have done for 25 years.
Thank you. Mike Clark, your opening statement.
Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. I especially like to see former Mayor Morissette here in the front row, so thank you all for coming. I decided that running for city council back 10 years ago was something that might be challenging to do, but at the time I had very young children. I came here to Eugene in '83 to attend the university and stayed. And my young children, I knew that this was the only community that they were ever going to grow up in. And if there was something I could do to help make it a better community, then I felt that I had a duty to try and to get my voice into the mix of those who made those decisions if I possibly could. I still feel that way today, and I believe that over the last 10 years of service on council, I've had an opportunity to be successful working with people on all sides of the council with very different points of view. One of the things I'm really proud of is to team up with folks I would say may not traditionally agree with or may not agree with on all issues, but with whom we may agree on one. And on that one, I'm interested in working together, as I have with Councilor Brown and Councilor Taylor on several occasions. So it's about this process of governing as mayor, I think, is more about understanding the tenor of the community and the flavor and personality of the other folks at the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Scott Landfield, your opening.
Yeah, Scott Landfield here. For 20 years, I've worked 60-plus hours per week, 52 weeks a year at Tsunami Books, and have had a hand in hosting over 3,500 activities in that same old bookstore, which I think is a real qualification for mayor. If elected, I will work equally long hours as your mayor for a single 4-year term. I'll always use the power of the office to save, creatively make safe, and enhance all our public space. I'll work hard to make voting popular and affordable. I want a lot of ballot measures, and I want a lot of candidates running for every office in affordable ways. And except for emergencies, I will not vote to break ties. I'll be going to a lot of neighborhood meetings, listening carefully, and I'll work closely with the homeless and their advocates. As mayor, I will ask City Manager John Reese to help create an updated city charter that allows for affordable full-time council positions, term limits, and careful oversight. And I will begin a productive conversation with Police Chief Pete Kearns, ideally starting with lunch at Kesey Square. I want your votes, and I want your friends' votes, and I will work very hard to earn them.
Thank you very much. Stefan Streck, your opening statement.
Outrageous. Good day. My name is Stefan Streck, and I love Eugene. I was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I moved here from Athens, Georgia. I've lived here in Eugene, Oregon for 17 years now. And since moving here, I've been all over the world. I've seen Australia and Western Europe, went to across Greenland, and I really do believe that Eugene's the best city on earth. We have things here that no place else in the world has, and it's because the people here have the freedom to express themselves in ways that people other places, they're repressed and they're denied that right. And people in Eugene, they stand up for themselves. There's been a lot of people who have moved here recently, and Eugene's been changing. There's a lot more money in town, but I've been seeing a lot less local business. And I think that with some really simple direction, we can help improve local business. We can make housing that's more for local citizens versus, you know, just people whose rich parents are paying for all their things. My dad's a doctor, he's a psychiatrist. I care about helping the homeless people and people with mental illness. However, I've financed this all myself and with, you know, donations from a very few people. My family has given me not a single dime or penny to finance this operation. I have gone 110% for the people, by the people. Eugene, Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Bob Cassidy, your opening statement.
I committed myself to being on the ballot a couple years ago as a service to the community. I came from the Lake Wobegon area of Minnesota 40 years ago, saw this like Lucy said, it's a beautiful city and this was going to be it. I did serve, continuing my credit union experience that you spoke of. I've had 50 years of experience there, including a couple years in Africa working for the World Council of Credit Unions. My commitment to being mayor is not that I wanted to lead the charge on any particular issue. If you want something done from the city, you really have to deal with the councilors, council people. They're the ones that make the decision, and if they can't, then the mayor has to break the tie. And I think that function I could do very well because I think I really represent the people in this community. If you look at the kind of people on my sheet that's in the back of the room or on your voters pamphlet, you'll see what kind of person I am and how I would proceed to break ties. Not everybody agrees with everything in this city, as you know. There are a few things that I would like to see happen in the community. My favorite is returning the Eugene Springfield celebration parade, and I'll get to others as we get more time here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will move to questions from the sponsors. We will start the first question to Mike Clark. All of you will have an opportunity to answer this question. The first question is, the office of the mayor comes with what is often called a bully pulpit, the opportunity to speak on a variety of issues or opportunity to advance a particular agenda. How would you use the Eugene mayor's bully pulpit? On what issues would you spend your political capital?
Thank you for the question. There's at least 2 or 3 good answers to that. Let me start and see if I get through all of them. Number 1, the strengthening of our local economy. There's a role for the mayor, there's a role for the council in doing a little more than we're currently doing and focusing more frequently at council to make our environment and our climate for business locally more successful. One of the things, it's funny, we always talk in political circles of, you know, people electeds who serve when we're doing economic development about the traded sector and how it's important to increase manufacturing. And the measure of that is called gross domestic product. And so you hear that all the time, GDP, the country's GDP is up or down. Do you know that we don't even measure it in Eugene? There's no local measurement of GDP anywhere. So while we talk about something that's important, we don't follow it up with the systems that allow us to know whether or not we're succeeding or not. That's the sort of thing that's number one, and I'll get to others later.
Thank you very much. Scott Landfield.
Well, I think I briefly stated a few of the things that I would use the bully pulpit for. Also, I'm a little concerned about how fast this town is going to grow in the next 20 years. I think it's going to grow a lot faster than the 40,000 projected. And I'd like to see it done right. A lot more emphasis on affordable housing, green housing, deconstruction instead of demolition, changing of the codes that will maybe allow for some better MUPD. I don't think we need the urban renewal. That 16 acres next to the E-Web building, I think, is the big issue of the next several years, and we as a community need to be talking about it and not being told what's going to happen.
Thank you. Stefan Streck, how would you use the bully pulpit?
Well, I believe that terminology is very important. And first off, with this bully pulpit, I'd prefer to call it a friend pulpit. I want to be a friend to the people of Eugene. I don't want to bully people. So if we're working with the city council, I like to find things that I have in common with people. People like people who like things that they like. And I like a very wide variety of things. So I try and focus on the things that I have in common with people, not the disagreements. I don't try and bully people. I want to find things that I have in common with people so that when we're working on projects, we can work together and be more productive. Because, if you like fishing and someone else likes fishing, it's a lot more likely that you can get a building, zoned properly versus, two people who have completely opposite differences, pro-littering versus anti-littering. We can all work together if we have a anti-littering agenda. That's my agenda. And I think most of Eugene has that same opinion. So we need to take the people that, they have the negative attitude, and we can improve that attitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Bob Cassidy.
I would like to see the things that matter coming up to the community be broadcast by the mayor, so that they have the opportunities to give input to the councilors. For instance, on the city hall right now, this is a problem that has been needed for some time, but input into this should come from either from a vote of the people or directly to the councilors. They're struggling with a lot of division right now. If you had seen the council meeting last night, you would see I thought it was a bit chaotic. Yes, Mike was there. This is the kind of thing, highlighting the concerns of the city, whether it's the homeless, and she does some of that currently. The need for paying a decent wage to our city employees, that sort of thing, I think is really necessary. We've got employees on food stamps right now, and I'm really upset about this.
Thank you very much. And Lucy Venice.
Thank you for this question. I see this answer in two parts, and the first part is the role of the mayor working with the city council and working with the city government, and the key role being one of communicating and bringing people together, agreeing on what the tasks at hand are and working forward on that. And that's a little separate from how I see the bully pulpit, which to me is a voice for people who need to have a voice and who may not have one. So in my mind, one way I would use the bully pulpit is in terms of opportunities for our young people related to education, related to job force training, how I could work as a mayor with city and businesses and educators to provide those opportunities. And the second big group were people who are struggling with unstable housing or who are homeless, who need an advocate and who need a voice and who need leadership from the city government in order to continue to move forward and make progress on all of those transitional steps. And that is a role the mayor is uniquely positioned to play.
Thank you very much. The next question will go first to Scott Landfield. Scott, how would you work with the business community to help make Eugene a more welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for immigrants and people of color?
For immigrants and people of color. Well, I am a member of the NAACP, so I would probably be working through them as much as possible. I spent 20 years of my life here in Lane County working with immigrants for the most part, so I have a pretty good understanding of those people. I'm pretty much grassroots level on those things. I do a lot of reading on those subjects, and probably just hands-on. It's very important to me that we grow these, but not artificially, too. And again, if we got to ship people from out of town to get them in here to work, affordable housing is going to be real important in this town.
Thank you very much. Stefan Streck.
Well, so far as making business more available to immigrants and people of color, I think that it's important to use dual language or multi-language forms. For example, if someone moves here and they've got the resources to start a business, but they're still learning the language, there's no reason to deny them the right to invest in our town and to give people jobs, and just because they're still learning, people learn their whole lives new things. And, for example, one of my favorite coworkers is a immigrant from Mali and speaks French, and he needs help with some of these forms for job assistance. And rich people and poor people have a lot of the same problems when it comes down to communication. They just need to be heard. And so that's definitely number one, is communication, multi-language forms. We can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Cassidy.
One of the greatest things we had in this city for about 25 years was the OUR Credit Union, which sponsored many businesses at the Fifth Street Market and then the market out across the street. Many people have gotten their first start in businesses and great deal of help, both in counseling with them and supplying the money for them. That kind of service is what's really needed for many of the immigrant people that's coming in.
Thank you. Lucy Venice.
One of the key roles of the city government is to set the standard for fair wages and fair labor practices to make sure that workers are fairly compensated. And our immigrant workforce is very significant and very vulnerable in this way, and the city has an obligation to ensure that people who are hired and people who have contracts with the city and in the city meet those fair labor practices. We have to assure that folks are paid adequately for their overtime, that adequate safety is in place. We should remember and know that 10.5% of our working population is Latino. And the fastest growing private businesses are Latino. This is a very important growing sector of our demographic in the business community. They bring skills and are an incredible asset to the community, and the city, and particularly the mayor, needs to step up and make sure that folks have opportunities to work and are fairly compensated.
Thank you. And Mike.
Would you read the question again, please?
Sure. How would you work with the business community to help make Eugene a more welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for immigrants and people of color?
A question of culture within our community is one that the mayor can address on the basis of personal relationships to some degree. What kind of a place do we want to live in, and how shall we treat one another? For me, egalitarianism, equality before the law, is a very important principle. But the direct answer to that question is illustrated by the fact that I was endorsed by the Chamber of Commerce and have many relationships in the business community. But I was also endorsed by a woman named Carmen Urbina, who was the diversity coordinator in the 4J school district for years and years and is well respected in that community. And I'm really proud to have that kind of support from multiple perspectives, from north part of our community, south, left, right, politically. And I think the capacity to bring people who might not otherwise speak well together to be able to listen to one another, to be able to talk and actually try to move the dial a little bit on our communication together, I have the capacity to do.
Thank you very much. The next question will go first to Stefan Streck. Stefan, what city actions, if any, are needed for downtown revitalization, and how should they be funded? Should the City Council extend the Downtown Urban Renewal District?
Well, first off, with downtown, we need to reprioritize how the police are allowed to do their jobs. There are, a lot of really hard-working police officers that, they're assigned to duties that really need to be reprioritized. We can, respond to calls versus making random stops. And, for example, if you're a downtown business owner and you've got a homeless person that's passed out high on heroin in the bathroom, that's bad for business. And if it takes you an hour or more to get the police to show up because the administration hasn't prioritized things, that's not the officer's job. That's the administration's job to, set policy like that. So I think that's number one, is just these really simple changes that have been ignored by the people who have that obligation. And I've had to watch this go on for too long. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Cassidy.
The development of the downtown area kind of starts with the center of town, which is a really vague concept. Right now, the past City Hall is not the center of town. There are numerous centers. I think one of the nicest things we could do is use that eWeb building for the City Hall right across from the Central Park that we have, and start imaging, visioning a city that has a center around something like that. That's a matter of maybe $10 million instead of $25 million, and really should be looked at and talked about. Mike tried to bring it up at the last session last night at the City Council, and it lost by 5-3. I hope people will get involved in talking about this issue. That's fine.
Thank you very much. Lucy Vinnis.
The Downtown Urban Renewal District has been a very effective urban renewal district. It has enabled us to do a lot of good work in our downtown and revitalization. And there are 4 pretty interesting, strong projects, the fiber optic cable probably being the most critical one in terms of revitalizing and enabling new businesses to expand and innovate downtown. At the same time, the City Council voted in 2010 when they renewed the district. They said they would never renew it again, and I do think that if they decide to use that tool again, that it should go up to a public vote. I will say also on the issue of the quality of life downtown that I hear a lot about homeless issues, and I do believe that part of our revitalization is going to be to address the way in which we manage what is happening in our downtown public spaces, and would propose an increased outreach of social work services along the lines of Cahoots in order to connect with those the folks that are hanging out downtown.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
Thank you very much. I am the counselor that originally proposed the idea back in December that we kick up a notch the speed at which we're trying to get ultra high speed fiber installed in our downtown core to the 127 buildings that were proposed. The staff's been talking about it and with property owners and folks downtown for quite a while. But speed matters in this particular case, because if we have the ability to do that within the next 6 months to a year, it will make us one of about a dozen cities in the country with that level of speed to be connected. That allows for our burgeoning tech sector downtown to really begin to grow organically with those companies that are already here, and they'll have an advantage that other folks won't have in other parts of the country. And that's what I mean by we as a city have to do the things that set the appropriate climate that make our local folks more competitive, and we can do that.
Thank you, Mike. Scott Landfield.
Well, we had some problems out on South Willamette. We've had them off and on for 20-some years. At this point, we worked with the police, and we have an email chain there with 97 businesses. And when there's a problem, there's 97 businesses that know about it. and we're pretty good at dealing with it. We don't really even need to see the police much because of that, and I will work with all the neighborhoods in putting that together, make things a little safer for us every day. As far as the fiber optics downtown, or people, my building recently went up for sale, and there were bidders from all over the world blowing the bids out of the water that was already accepted. And you know, I'm not too worried about spending money up front to attract people to this town. I'm more concerned with how well we who are here grow ourselves and our own lives. I think the money for that fiber optics can be, urban renewal can be found in many other directions.
Thank you very much. The next question will go first to Bob Cassidy. Bob, what should the city do to help reduce pedestrian and bicyclist injuries and fatalities?
The city is really, over a number of years, probably starting from the time of Ruth Bascom, developing very good paths and safety things. The bicycle committee in the city is really trying to pursue a goal of zero casualties, and that should, but that requires spending more money. It's a small percentage of money that we spend on transportation right now, $588,000 out of millions of dollars. That needs to be looked at and studied, and this is the kind of thing that city councilors need to dispute and decide. I would have no problem in favoring the bicycle community if there was a tie vote to break.
Thank you. Lucy Venice.
I have canvassed 1,500 doors in all 8 wards over the last couple of months, and I've walked on a lot of neighborhood streets, and I would say that neighborhoods struggle with all kinds of street conditions that have a direct impact on bicyclists and pedestrians. There are lots of discontinuous sidewalks in neighborhoods forcing pedestrians to walk out into the street. There are streets with terrible potholes, and there are major avenues, River Road being one most obvious one, where the crossings are very far and few, and it's very dangerous. So I am very focused on the quality of those immediate neighborhood streets. That is actually how we experience a sense of well-being and safety in our world, is can we walk, can our children walk, can we bike safely? And I think some of those traffic calming devices and increased pedestrian crossings would go a long way.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
Thank you. I was proud to vote in favor of the recently proposed Vision Zero plan that the council passed. And one of the that I heard some people, make funny remarks about that, but I was proud to vote in favor of that because one of the pieces of that is about how we engineer crosswalks. And it's about the light timing. It's simple things in the engineering of how the built world works that can make things safer, and safety is key. For example, at an intersection, the light to walk turns at the same time as the green light to drive. Whereas if the light to walk were just a few seconds before that green light to drive, it gives that pedestrian a chance to step into the street and begin their rightful walk across. And as a result, the cars know, hey, you got to stop. But there are some places where I wish we had done that sooner. On Willamette Street, for example, I think the test we're running there is a mistake. I think we should have put bikes on, we should have made a bicycle way on the side street, and I am just hopeful that it doesn't end badly with bikes on that street.
Thank you. Scott Landfield.
Well, I'm, of course, in favor of Vision Zero in whatever form. Out on Willamette Street, it's been the 21 years we've been there, between 24th and 29th, there's not been a single traffic death. A lot of that is because the neighborhood took control of that busy, crazy street. At one time, they had to bring it to council in the 80s when it was the gut. But since then, we've been able to do a lot of things, getting lights in, getting speed limit changed. I do like bicycles. I'm a bicyclist. I was a professional bicyclist. I bicycle all the time. I prefer not being on major thoroughfares with my bicycle. And I will talk very specifically with neighborhoods with what they want to make it easier to get around.
Thank you. And Stefan Streck.
Yeah. I really appreciate this question because this is something that, it's really important. When I was living down on Vine Maple Street growing up, one of my neighbors was hit by a car and he died. There's a white bicycle down on 13th and Willamette that's there to memorialize him. And ironically, very sadly, this bike memorial for a pedestrian death is right in front of one of the worst planned bike lanes that could have ever possibly been designed. Right there on 13th and the Willamette, the bike lane goes from the side of the road into the middle of traffic. And it makes no sense. It's completely hazardous. It's a danger to bicyclists. It's a danger to drivers that they might hit people, and it's being done all over the city that they're weaving bike lanes across traffic lanes. It's completely irresponsible. It's dangerous. It needs to be stopped, and whoever's doing this needs to lose their job. I'd tell them, you're fired. Get out of here. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, we go first to Lucy Vinnis. Lucy, some critics have suggested that the Parks and Open Space Bond adopted by Eugene voters in 2006 has disproportionately funded projects in South Eugene. What is your reaction to this criticism? How would the city address community-wide needs? How should the city address community-wide needs in parks and open space?
Well, there is no question that the City Council has made decisions over the last decade with the last park bond that they had some one-time opportunities to purchase open space, and they did so. And with the expectation that they would ultimately have to find funds to do the next phase of things, which is to improve parklands that we own and to upgrade. Parks and Rec has done a very thorough examination of the parks that we have, and I'm familiar with many of the parks and the deterioration that we feel from the lack of upgrades, the fixed facilities that are getting old. I think that the next phase of this is a presentation of some of the specific costs and priorities. The community values that, and the council will then have to make a decision about whether there's another bond that gets floated, if there are other ways that the community wants to approach the improvement of our parks and rec facilities.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
Thank you. I think if we put out another parks bond, we might suffer a loss at that. And I think we've spent the money on things that we did not plan to spend it on. In some cases, there were once upon a time opportunities that we needed to take. But on several occasions, we spend it in ways that I believe the majority of community would not have liked us to. We have a critical problem in what we call our O&M, operations and maintenance, and taking care of parks. We have a backlog, and we need to do this work differently. That's why I've met with the folks from the Parks Foundation to talk about how, since they exist right next to the University of Oregon with a foundation that does so well, what can we learn from them? How can we build a parks foundation with an endowment sufficient to allow us to have world-class parks in our community? We've begun a plan to do that with the folks at the Parks Foundation, and that's a very important thing to me. I think we have a number of responsibilities we're not meeting to our parks plan. Thank you.
Scott Lanfield.
Very good. I like that. One thing about South, everybody, of course, complains about South getting a lot, South Eugene. But I've lived in many neighborhoods around Eugene, and the people in South are very well organized. And that has a lot to do with what happens in the city. They know how to do things at key moments, and things happen. And I would want to help empower all the neighborhoods with those how to create their own bully pulpits. As far as financing the parks, I'm not sure. Ballot measures, I will always be moving towards ballot measures. But you don't have to jump on one and have it stomped into the ground, as we've seen them done numerous times around here. We can present something that's palatable to the most number of people before we even get it out there, and work more towards consensus before the vote.
Thank you. Stefan Streck.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Some critics have suggested that the Parks and Open Space bond adopted by Eugene voters in 2006 has disproportionately funded projects in South Eugene. What is your reaction to this criticism, and how should the city address community-wide needs in parks and open space?
Well, South Eugene has some of the largest parks in Eugene. I mean, if you measure that. And so far as the maintenance of the other parks, I have a really good solution for this. We've got a really serious problem with bike theft here in Eugene. We're, basically the #1 place to get your bike stolen. If you buy a kryptonite bike lock, they're really expensive. You have to buy the best one they make. It's called a New York lock, because there's only 2 cities that aren't covered in their insurance program, New York City and Eugene, Oregon. We can start making mandatory community service, minimum community service sentences for bike theft, and this will create a ton of hours for park maintenance for all of Eugene, and it'll also help get rid of the bike theft, because everyone in town has had their bikes stolen, and the police don't do anything about it. They can't. What we can do is make people give back to the community with some positive contributive service. Thank you.
And Bob Cassidy.
I have heard this concern and complaint for the last 25 years from the north end of town, saying us people in the south end of town have too much park space or proportioned. And it's true. We've got a piece right in my neighborhood, 53 acres of park called Unimproved Park. It's right adjacent to the Laurelwood Golf Course. It houses turkeys and blackberry bush and deer, and it's not improved very much. I noticed recently it has a little bit of path improvement. It's got parking space for about 4 cars. It's nice to, have a place for the animals to retreat, but this is an area that is having problems keeping enough kids in school to keep the kids open. Like on Harris Street, that school is talking about merging with, I'll leave it go at that.
Thank you. The next question will go first to Mike Clark. Mike, do you support our current city manager type of government?
I do. I wish it worked better than it does, but yes, I absolutely do. From a principled position, one of my key beliefs, as I mentioned before, is this notion of American egalitarianism, that all of us are equal before the law. It's also important to say that the uniquely American idea is that we're all born with individual rights and the notion of individual sovereignty, and that the job of the government, that governments are instituted to protect people's individual and civil rights. That's the job of government, to protect people's rights. So the representatives at the table should be doing the things from the perspective of, I need to protect the rights of the people that I represent. The manager's job is to implement the policies through the use of his staff as best he can, with the best direction from staff or from council. But we operate as a policy board, and our job is to make sure to protect folks along the way to those accomplishments.
Great. Thank you very much. Scott Landfield.
I'm not in favor of the way things are right now. I hear too much in opposition to not go along with it. I think if we're going to grow 40,000 minimum number in the next 20 years, our counselors can't be part-timers working other jobs and just showing up and being told things a year after the fact. 12 months ago, it was known that the city hall was going to be blown up in cost, and then it became public a few days ago. I think that we need accountability. We have a darn good city manager, but anybody who's been in a system long enough starts overriding. They start creating their own fantasies, and it's not a good thing. I like the term limits. I like 6 full-time counselors helping. If we have a city manager, we need an oversight board.
Thank you. Stefan Streck.
I think the style of government we have is, very positive. America, we got the best system of government in the world, and Eugene, number one. However, there are some discrepancies. The city council, they each make about like $12,000 a year or something like that, and then the mayor, I found out, gets about $20,000. City manager gets like $180,000. So that's like almost double the salary of those 9 people put together. And this wasn't voted on by the Eugene people. I don't know, who thought this was a really good idea, but, whoever's making that much money should do a lot of work. And in the homelessness councils that went on, I looked at those. And the note from the city manager says, because this is an educational seminar, no recommendation is necessary. I'd have been upset when I saw that. I'd have said, you make $180,000 a year, you got to say something besides, this isn't my job. Because if you don't want this job, you're fired. Thank you.
Bob Cassidy.
In 2002, when we rewrote the city charter, that was the first item that we discussed, and it was unanimous, and I am in agreement with that we should have this type of government. It's used by most of the people. It's recommended as a model plan for cities. I think it's not functioning the way it should right now. I think the council doesn't have the control over it that they should have. The council should be involved with the president and vice president involved in the agenda setting, in running the meeting, in doing a number of things that they are really in a position of the superior position, telling the manager what to do. Too much is coming from the staff, and the dialogue of city council is going to the staff, not to each other. We need to have more dialogue with the city council.
Thank you. And Lucy Venice.
I do support the city manager form of government. I think the root of this question has to do more with our feeling of distrust and a failure of communication with our government and a feeling of it not being accountable. There are many examples of this, but my thought about this is that there's a gap between the moment when council directs a certain policy by the staff and the staff sort of disappears into the dark to address that issue, and it can be months later before it comes back. And so we end up writing a sort of our own narrative about what we think has happened with that policy and how we think it's being addressed. My proposal is to do a monthly dashboard report on key issues so that I can inform the public both about where we are on any given policy. City Hall financing could have been one, and also work directly with the city councilors and the staff to say, where are we on this? Are there questions your constituents have, so that we close that accountability gap and that communication gap.
Thank you. The next question will start with Scott Landfield. Scott, how do you feel about tax breaks for development, such as for student housing or in enterprise zones?
Well, I think we need to go back to the drawing board. Nobody seems to be happy in the last decade with anything that's been done except for the developers. I have people working for me who live in Capstone. It's the second year. They hate it. And I'm not into giving these people breaks to start them out. Maybe we needed it to get things jump-started, but once the rig is running, you go with that. And again, where are the green roofs? It's built into Chicago codes. I'm not seeing them. I saw a blue roof on top of Capstone from the leaks. Demolition, 2 days, you can take out a whole city block. I've seen it happen. How about deconstruction? I'm helping deconstruct Roosevelt School. We need to get our priorities, slow it down a little bit, and straighten out some of our codes before we start looking at giveaways, because they'll take them and brag about them all over the world.
Thank you. Stefan Streck.
If you could repeat that one, please.
How do you feel about tax breaks for development, such as for student housing or in enterprise zones?
Well, tax breaks for development, they're, to a certain extent, they're absolutely necessary. I mean, if you want to have development, you gotta motivate people. Money motivates people. And tax breaks, nobody likes taxes. I know I don't like taxes. I don't know if anyone else here likes paying taxes, but that's hey, it's America. You can do whatever you want. But when it comes down to tax breaks for development, I really support tax breaks for people's development more so than corporate development. If you have a home and you want to expand it so that way you can rent out your basement as a separate unit and maintain your home for retirement, that should be an option. And a senior citizen shouldn't have to pay a $10,000 permit fee before they even put a single nail or board down to modify their own home that they've lived in possibly their whole life. There's a lot that can be done to use tax breaks for real people. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Cassidy.
The Mufti-type tax breaks are a valuable tool for cities to use to develop. And if we want to subsidize the university, that's a good way to do it. Maybe we've done too much. They are our biggest employer in the city, and so we really cater to the university and help build buildings for them to house all of the students. We don't demand enough. We don't demand the green roofs, and a whole series of things along with the building, and we don't have clawback provisions that we can enforce to make this really worthwhile. But it's something that will go on, and it's good to do it.
Thank you. Lucy Venice.
I think there are a couple of things we probably all agree on, and that is that we're not happy with Capstone, and we're not happy that we offered exemptions for that. And we can all agree, probably with the City Council, on the decision not to use the multiple unit property tax exemption for any more student housing, which they have put a moratorium on and an end to that, and that is a good decision. That kind of property tax exemption is a tool, and it is one of the tools the city has to direct and encourage development where they think there is a public benefit. And that tool has been revised. There was a moratorium on using it. It's got probably a dozen revisions. It has better oversight. It hasn't been used yet in its new revised form. We'll see as the council reviews the proposal over Rogue Ales that could provide much needed downtown housing and may ask for a tax exemption there, whether the new rule guarantees the public benefits that we are all seeking.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
I don't like them because they're not fair, is the direct answer to your question. But I will say that I'm proud that I worked with Councillor Brown to revise and propose the fairly massively revised MUPD ordinance that the council did pass, requiring 30% workforce housing in projects that are built, requiring a great deal more in the way of public benefit, from certified payroll so we know how many local folks have been hired on that project, to a number of other things, and lead standards, all manner of lists. But here's the thing. It's unfair and it's not right that anybody should pay a different amount because, as I've said earlier, it's not equal before the law. But here's the choice. Senate Bill 100 requires that we can prove to the state that we can accommodate the building of density in the core of our community in order not to expand it. Senate Bill 100 requires that we can prove those goals. And so one of the pieces is that we have to be able to show how we're going to build densely under the law, and so we have to incentivize it.
Thank you. Scott Lanfield.
I thought I may have answered that. No. I have more to say.
Sorry, did I start? I'm sorry, I got...
And now Scott, round two.
Stefan Streck, let's start this question with you. What is your position on providing adequate open space in downtown? Do you believe Kesey Square should be sold?
I absolutely believe that Kesey Square belongs to the people of Eugene, for all the people of Eugene. Even, the birds and the dogs and the cats that want to wander through there. This is not something that is an option to be sold for anybody for any reason. It's the only public square we have. Public space is a top priority of my campaign. I've announced this from day one. Back when there was, 100 people yelling on the courthouse steps. I brought 2 megaphones. I had extras. I am quite willing to be vocal about this situation, and we need more public space. People talk about the urban growth boundary. I mean, if that's ever looked at, and I think the city council is really trying to push that through. I don't know how that's going to go, but my priority would be to establish an increased amount of public and open space in Eugene. And I think that we can fund this and maintain this through the mandatory minimum public service for bike theft. I think this is all really, really possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Cassidy.
I would preserve as much public space that we already have as a high priority. I'm particularly concerned about the public space we have on the river. It's the eWeb property. That building is going to be sold or rented pretty soon. If we could use that for a city hall, and it's still public space. But when we've got an asset like that, public space, we should keep it. Like Casey Square, that can be easily kept there and used very effectively. It doesn't need to be sold for private development.
Thank you. Lucy Finnis.
At this point, I think we are keeping Kesey Square. I realize the council has still voted to keep the option of selling it open so that it may still come back. There certainly has been an outpouring for the need for that public space and for better management of that space. I think, again, this is another one of those conversations that brings us back around to the trust and communication, because part of the emotion around an issue like this is, again, this feeling that somehow there's a backroom deal that's happening with the city. And again, this is another conversation where a better communication loop, and I'm talking about a monthly dashboard report to keep people up to speed, could help lower the temperature level on these conversations and make people feel more confident that there is a public process, that they can engage in that process, that their counselors are listening to them, and that they're all part of the process, rather than feeling that an issue is just getting slid over to staff and staff is just going to do what they want. And I think that's what we need to fix.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
I think Lucy hit on one of the nuggets of a problem that this is, and that the perception that there's a sweetheart deal somewhere. But here's the interesting thing. It's not like the council or the staff or the manager said, hey, let's get some way to build on that space. What happened was there's some local business folks who've wanted to build there for a long time and said, hey, we've taken the time and the money and to build this proposal for what we might do there. Is it okay? What do you think? Will you sell it to us? And here's the interesting part that we have to fix, and this is why I proposed the other day at council that we have a work session to do this, and we're going to do it now. My colleagues agreed. We have no process, no rules around how we sell public space or public land in the city. We don't have any rules around it, and we need to. We need to make it a process that if someone comes to us with a proposal, there's an understood way that gets handled from there so that it's fair, open, transparent, and everybody knows what to expect from there. And that's how you avoid that perception of a sweetheart deal taking place.
Thank you. And Scott Landfield.
Well, of course, I've been adamant about Kesey Square, and I have some ideas about how to make it safe and enjoyable for the whole community, and I have a lot of ideas about a lot of places. I was adamant about saving the public commons known as Civic Stadium, and pretty much put what I had on the line for it. And I'm not into selling anything the city owns as far as property. I'm really not into it. We can repurpose it. If we're going to grow, again, 40,000 is the minimum growth in the next 20 years right now. And they're not talking about us growing as each individual. They're talking about just pumping people in here. We need space that we can always have here. This stuff will always be for sale to the highest bidder if we want to put it up there. We don't have to even think about that at this point in time.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Bob Cassidy. Bob, what is your plan to create housing affordable to minimum wage earners in the downtown where there is easy access to public transportation?
I don't have a plan for that. And as mayor, I would break a tie. This is the kind of activity, the information for which, where you put it, what you put in, how much you know, the whole aspect to it is something that needs to be studied by the entire city council, and they should be able to come up with some kind of solution if that's their goal, and I think it's a good goal. And if they can't make a decision, I certainly could after they discuss it very thoroughly. I don't have a particular plan.
Thank you. Lucy Finnis.
Thank you. I have several thoughts on this. The first is that we now have, because of the state legislature, I'm just blanking on the word. The possibility that we can can as a local jurisdiction can incorporate low-income housing in our own properties, in our own development program. So that gives us some options. The revised multiple unit property tax exemption offers others. I'm very interested in I would like to see low income and affordable housing downtown, but I would also like to see it all over the town. And one of the things that I think about the inequities in our world, and is certainly the people growing up in poverty, the children growing up in poverty, they need to be in schools all over the district. And the way we do that is structurally by having lower income housing, less expensive housing all over our city. And so ultimately, I think that's a goal, is to build towards that.
Great. Thank you. Mike Clark.
Thank you, sir. The MUPTI ordinance that I mentioned before that George Brown proposed and I worked on a little with him and helped him and then fought for at the table included a 30% workforce housing requirement. In other words, anybody gets a MUPTI, you have to prove that the rents you will charge for up to 30% of the units are at 60 to 80% of AMI, average median income. Okay, so that you're proving that you're planning the project that way, and that's why we give a tax incentive, because that public benefit puts lower and affordable housing to folks that work for a living at lower wages downtown. Another one is this. Bob's right. I've fought for this forever. It was in the paper that I think we should be putting the new city hall at eWeb. We'd have twice the space for half the money. I couldn't get the colleagues to go there, but we have an entire square city block without alleys. It's worth about $5 million. Can you imagine the number of people we could have living downtown and in an affordable way in our core on that space? It's hundreds and hundreds.
Thank you very much. Scott Landfield.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that. All ideas about that. I like the 16 acres over by the eWeb. I don't really want to turn it over to some rich developer from out of the area to build it up. I want to direct our city staff to see what kind of federal money's in that, what we can do with it, how we can quiet the trains, how we can make it livable, how can it be an experimental community for all of America to look at. That's a 16-acre piece, and it'd be adjacent to the city hall. That's a beautiful place, and then we got the place right over here. Yes, of course, neighborhoods throughout town we identify. We go to the neighborhoods, talk with them in their refinement plans, and determine, identify where affordable housing can be built. Work with, of course, St. Vincent de Paul has been a great asset for something like that. So continue to work with them as much as possible. And any and every other way we can do that. Because just because you don't have money, I have no money. I like living in this town, and it's becoming a question.
Thank you. Stefan Streck.
So low income and affordable housing downtown. Typically, you want high-class housing to bring people with money downtown to spend money at businesses in the city center. It makes more sense to have low and affordable income housing, maybe not necessarily directly downtown, nearby downtown. We can get the land for more reasonable amounts of money. And that's the sort of thing that tax exemptions should be going for. For example, with the capstone, it's built right up to the sidewalk, and they didn't even use real cement to make that sidewalk. I mean, low-income affordable housing, that's what they did, but they're charging a lot for it. I think this just needs more oversight. I mean, the people rubber stamping these things, they're not reading them. It's the same as what's going on in Washington, D.C. when people don't read documents. I'll read this stuff. Thank you. I can read.
Thank you. We now come to the portion of the forum for closing statements. We'll begin with Lucy Vinnis.
Thank you. I am a lifelong progressive, and I carry forward the values and priorities that are central to most of the people in Eugene. And I want to urge you to consider this carefully. This mayor's race is really important. My colleague and opponent, Mike Clark, is campaigning on his experience. And I want to say a shift in leadership to Mike Clark will be not subtle. It will be a significant shift. He's campaigning on his experience, and his voting record tells the story. He has voted no on climate recovery ordinance, no on Baskin Village to provide housing for homeless families, no on a paid sick leave ordinance. I have worked hard to get the support and endorsement of groups and individuals that we all trust. I'm endorsed by 4 city councilors, by Mayor Piercy, Commissioner Pete Sorensen. I'm endorsed by state legislators, school board members, and business people. Oregon League of Conservation Voters, Many Rivers chapter of the Sierra Club, NARAL Pro-Choice, Basic Rights Oregon, Eugene Education Association, and working men and women of the trades and in the city of Eugene have also endorsed me. I am running a grassroots campaign. I've knocked on doors. I've raised funds from over 500 people. I will do the work for you.
Thank you. Mike Clark.
I would like to thank my opponent for pointing out all of the things she did and making the question the right one, I think. Where is our community today? Do you think things are going perfectly? I don't. I think we need a subtle shift in what we focus on at the council table and how we make decisions. And it's easy to point out the votes that, seem like they're strange and how awful. But the councilor's job, once you've done it for a while, is a binary question. You can only vote yes or no, and you cannot abstain. And sometimes the questions that we face are not about whether or not you agree with what we're working on, like the ones she mentioned that I often and do support, but it's how. And I may find a question where I agree absolutely on the what we should be doing, but the how that is proposed to do it is something I think is entirely wrong and would be dangerous. So that's an easy thing to explain. But this is a fundamental time in our community where we're going to be building on the 17 acres of eWeb's property in the next few years. We're going to establish our UGB. We're going to put the city hall there. It's somebody who's been a part of this process for a while and wants to kind of subtly change how we're doing things. I don't want to be the mayor who tells people you will comply, that we know better than you, and that we're going to tell you how we're doing things. I think I've proved in my work in South Willamette that what I want to do is, from the bottom up, work with neighbors and people to represent everyone in Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scott Landfield.
I'm going to try and get along with everybody. That's rule 1 for me. And I am going to try and slow down the growth as far as numbers in town. That's part of my campaign. The quality of the growth is very important here, from the bottom up, from the top down. I'd like to, again, like I say, I do believe we're at a point and we have enough intelligence where we can have full-time people sitting at a round table in a new city hall, discussing things in a little more cooperative manner, a little more collaborative manner than what we're getting. I'm not happy that out of area people get the arts projects. I'm here for the artists of this community. The city hall just gave away 1% to out of the area. I'm not happy that there's no space for city hall or for city councilors there for the possibility of them later being real people It's been a slow growth process. We've all been here long enough to see where they were volunteer retired citizens. Now they got a modest pay. It's time to grow another step. John Reese would be a good member of that 6-person, 8-person city council around a round table. And a lot of subtle changes that will have a deep, long-lasting effect. I'm tired of always hearing about fighting around this town.
Thank you. Stefan Streck.
Righteous. Thank you all for coming here tonight. This has been fantastic. When I signed up December 18th, put my name down, this is, it's been quite the ride. My plan is simple, effective, and reasonable. I want to work with the veterinary students that are nearby. We can set up a place where homeless and low-income people can take their animals. Their animals will be taken care of. I got in touch with the Front Steps people out of Austin, Texas. I got their CEO's number in my phone. I can call them up anytime. I want to set up someplace similar to what they do. They're housing over 500 people right now in Austin, Texas. They provide housing, job assistance. It's a great program. I think we can do even better. In addition to that, this program with the students that can help homeless and low-income people's animals, they can also have a shuttle that goes to senior citizens' homes. House calls are hard to get. There's a lot of people that could really use this service. I love Eugene. I care about this city. I've been all over the world. I've seen lots and lots of things. Sydney, Australia, the wilderness of Greenland. And Eugene, the people of Eugene, they have ideas that, you don't hear at other places. And I'm willing to hear these ideas, and I'm willing to implement, positive progress in this city, not just irresponsible rubber stamping green lights. I'm willing to read the documents. I'm willing to put in the work. I've worked at the University of Oregon since 2008 when I was in high school. I clock in, I clock out. I do my job every time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bob Cassidy.
I'm going to be a little bit repetitious here. I would like to see the $15 minimum wage for our employees and people doing contract work for us. I think it's immoral that we have people giving city services to us that are on food stamps. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And working as temporary workers for over 20 years. And we have that, a lot of them. I'd like to see the Eugene Springfield Celebration Parade. That'd be a one-day affair. I'd really like to see a different activity in the city council so that they do more dialogue with each other and they're not so dominated by the city staff. And certainly I would like to see the City Hall in the EWEB building, and even that property right next to the building, it's all fenced in. It could be used temporarily for parking campers and cars, people who are living in their cars right now. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking all of the candidates. So ballots will be arriving in the mail soon. We encourage you all to vote early and often, right?
As they say in Chicago.
Thanks again and good night.
Thank you.